Having the Houdini simulation inside Blender is something that no Blender user will ever pass. We will learn how to make 3 different eye-catching sweet shots using the Blender simulation system. So without any further ado, let's get this going. So we can start our project by adding a UV sphere or even an icosphere, but it will be much better for us and it gives us a much better result if we use a quad sphere. And to enable the extra mesh add-on, go to Edit, Preferences. In the Get Extensions tab, here search for Extra Mesh, which is this one. And in this Get Extensions tab, you have to be connected to the internet. And for those of you who haven't yet installed these Extra Mesh objects, there will be an install button here, as you can see. So if you click on it, it will barely take even 5 seconds to install the add-on. And there you have it. Now if we press Shift A in the mesh, we have some new mesh objects, and here you can see the round cube. So add it into your scene, don't touch anything, and open this bottom menu where we can set the operator presets on quad sphere, and there you have it. Then to get rid of this jaggy look, you can right click to shade auto smooth, then press F2 and rename it to Floyd ball. The next step is to make the bubbles that later will be added as a particle system. So with the Floyd ball selected, press Shift D to make a duplicate, then press X to move it aside for now. Press F2 and rename it to bubbles. So here there is a very important tip. We should invert the normals of the bubble. You may ask why. Well, let me tell you later. We will get to it. So in the overlays drop-down menu, there is an option called face orientation. If we enable that, you can see the normals of any object, and for the time being nothing actually happened. But if we zoom into this object, you can see that inside of it has turned into red. This object has its normal in a normal way. It means it is not inverted. So press Tab to go into edit mode, then press A to make sure everything is selected. Now if we press Alt N, we can open the normals menu, and from here choose flip normals. Press Tab again to jump back into object mode, and you can see that now this object has turned into red. It means that its normals are inverted, which will come in handy later. So let's disable the face orientation. And now we can add another element. So select the Floyd ball, press Shift D to make another duplicate. Right click to drop it in the same place. Then press F2 and rename it to a skin. And since we don't need it for now, we can press H to hide it. You can see in the outliner that the skin is hidden. Select the Floyd ball, press Tab to go into edit mode. Again press A to make sure everything is selected. Then press Shift D to make a duplicate of it and move it aside like so. You may ask, why did we duplicate it in the edit mode? Because if we go into object mode, we can see that this whole object is one singular object, and that's the profit of duplicating in the edit mode. But if we duplicate in the object mode, this becomes a totally new object. So let's get rid of that and jump back into edit mode. Now with this one selected, if you hover your mouse over this and press L, you can select the entire mesh, or you can select a single vertex or a few vertices, then press Ctrl L. It will do the same thing. So let me scale this one up a little bit. Again press Shift D to make a duplicate and move it to the other side of the main Floyd ball. You can scale this down. And simply do the same thing for a few times. And when you are duplicating, make sure that none of these balls intersect into each other, because later it will make a lot of problems. So let's get back into the object mode, and here the fun starts. We are going to give this Floyd ball the class physics. So with it selected, head over to the physics panel, and from here give it the class physics. we should increase the quality a step, so let's double it up and set it on 10. Then scroll down a little bit. Here you can see a really important factor, which is the pressure. So enable that and we can increase the pressure to 10. Scroll down a little bit more where we have the collisions, and for the quality of it we need a higher value like 10. And something that I forgot, under pressure there is Floyd density. We should slightly increase that because it is pretty sensitive. So let's go for 0.1. Then another very important factor, which is self-collision. If we don't enable that, these balls will go into each other. We will see that later. So make sure to enable self-collisions and its settings are fine. The last point is we should disable the gravity for this Floyd ball, because now if we press play, they will just fall down. So in the physics panel, scroll all the way down where we can see the field weights. The first property, which is the gravity, set it all the way on 0. Now if we play, they don't fall down. And this is what we were looking for. Now to make the balls to hit each other and actually stick to each other, we should add a force field. So Shift A, in the force field, add a force, which is this one. Then to adjust its setting, head over to the physics panel where we have the strength property that you can see it is set on 1. When we give the strength a positive value, it means that it has an outward movement. It means that it shoots everything away from itself. So if I set it on 1000 and play, this is the result, which is exactly the vice versa of what we were looking for. So subsequently, let's give it a negative value so that it will have an inward movement. So let's set the strength on negative 1000. Now if we play, this is exactly what we need. But here is another catch. If we take a closer look, we can see that because of the lack of the geometry, these balls have a pretty jaggy and broken look. And to get rid of that, we can select the Floyd ball and then press Ctrl 2 to give them a subdivision surface by a level of 2. And if we go to the modifiers panel, here you can see the sub modifier, and make sure the viewport and the render levels are set on 2. Now this is much better. I really like the upward movement of them. But if you still have some problems, in most cases that's because these balls were intersecting before the simulation happened. And to show you better, if we go into edit mode, they were something like this in the first place. They were intersecting like that. So make sure there is some gap between them. But if that's not the case for you, you can get back to the physics tab and under collisions tab, you can increase the quality to 12 or even 20. So let's go for 12 because 10 always gives a good result. Now to clean up our viewport and make it much faster, we can export our Floyd ball as an Alembic file and then import it into the scene again. So if you're happy with the result that you have for the time being, once we export this as an Alembic file and then import the Alembic file into Blender, we cannot change the animation anymore unless we make some changes to the main one and then export it again. So if you're happy with this, you can make sure to select this object and go to File, Export, and here choose Alembic format, where on the right side menu we have some important adjustments to make. First of all, make sure to enable selection only. It means that Blender will export only the objects that you have selected, which is this Floyd ball. Then scroll down a little bit and here enable apply subdivisions. Since our Floyd ball has a subdivision surface modifier, it is definitely necessary to apply this for the Alembic exported file. Then finally, in the particle system, disable export hair and export particles. Then on the right side, pick a location and from here introduce a name. For example, let's call it Alembic V1 and then export Alembic. And here is something that is worth mentioning. Your Alembic file animation time will be exactly matching the ending frame of your timeline, which is set on 250 frames as a default. So if you want to increase or decrease the animation time of the exported file, make sure to change your ending frame here. Then since we don't need the main Floyd ball anymore, we can with it selected press M to move it to a new collection and call it height, and simply hide the height collection. Now to import our Alembic file, go to File, Import, and here choose Alembic format. Navigate to where you have exported the file, select it, and then import Alembic. Now if we play, you can see now we have a much faster viewport, and that is really necessary, especially for those who don't have a good PC. This is a really great way. And then to stay organized, press F2 and rename it to Alembic. So the main reason that we are using an Alembic file, we are going to add a particle system for this. And that particle system works much better with an Alembic file that is a real mesh, rather than an object like this Floyd ball that has a class physics with itself. So with the Alembic file selected, go to the particles panel and make a new particle system for it. Let's rename it to bubble. Then switch the type from emitter to hair. For the number 1000 is too much. Let's go for 500. We can set the viewport on wireframe to take a better look. Now open the source, set the emit from to volume, because we want to have the particle system inside these balls rather than on its faces. This particle system that we are going to make will be the tiny bubbles, so it would be nice to increase the jittering amount and set it on 2. Now to really get the bubbles, open the render and set the render as to object. Then for the instance object, here choose our bubbles. Right now they are huge, so let's decrease the scale and set it on 0.01. We can always get to it. And then why not using some randomness? So let's go for 0.8. And by the way, here is a very good tip. If you can see any bubbles in this centering ball, that's because of this force field. And since we are using an exported file, we actually don't need this force anymore. So if we select it and move in the timeline, now you can see the bubbles inside the centering ball. Now let's start making the materials. So go to the material panel and here make a new material. Let's rename it to glass. Now to adjust it, open the base color and increase the value all the way to 1. Decrease the roughness all the way to 0. The IOR of water is 1.333. Then finally open transmission, and for the weight, let's increase it all the way to 1. Now select the bubble that we have here, and in the material panel, open this existing materials drop down menu and choose the same glass material. We are almost done and we only need to take care of the skin. So enable the skin and select it. Then enable the wireframe mode, press S to scale it up and make sure that the skin encases all the balls and nothing is intersecting with it. For example, this will cause some problem. So let's move it a little bit and make sure it is not intersecting at all. And another tip here, I have made a mistake. I have set these balls far away from each other, which I shouldn't have. So make sure to set them closer to each other, and that will definitely give a better result, because I'm pretty sure that these balls are going to intersect with the skin and they will penetrate it. And since we have scaled up the skin in the object mode, definitely don't forget to press Ctrl A to apply the scale. Now to make it stick to the balls, go to the modifiers panel and in the deform, give it the shrink wrap modifier. And for the target, choose the Alembic file, and there you have it. Then to improve the look of this skin, in the generate, give it a subdivision surface modifier and set the level of both viewport and render on 2. Right now the balls are penetrating out of the skin. To prevent that, in the shrink wrap modifier, we can increase the offset, a slight change like 0.1. You can see it makes a lot of changes, but since I have set these balls far away from each other, they are still penetrating, and that's the only reason that causes this problem. So when you are making your own scene, try to put them closer to each other, and then you won't have any problem like this. We can yet make it better by adding a smooth modifier. So in the deform, give it the smooth modifier, increase the factor to 1 and repeat to 5. However, if you still can see some intersections, we can solve that by adding a solidify modifier. So in the generate, give it the solidify modifier. Set the offset on 1. It means that the thickness will be applied outward, because we don't want to have an inward thickness, and make sure to put it before the smooth modifier. Now this is much better, but the same issue as I have mentioned before. Now let's make our lighting system. So go to the render panel, set the render engine on cycles and device on GPU compute. Then switch into rendered view. And since we don't have any light for now, open the shading drop down menu and disable scene lights and scene board, just to use the Blender default HDRI for now. And by the way, make sure the skin is selected and give it the same glass material. Now you can see, and we can change the HDRI. I guess, yeah, this one is a little better. Now let's make the particle system for the skin. So go to the particles panel, make a new particle system, rename it to bubbles, switch it to hair, set the numbers on. For this one, let's go for 1500 or maybe more, 2500. And for the skin, emit from should be set on faces, not on volume. Jittering amount again set on 2. Set the render as to object. For the instance object, again choose the bubbles. They are so huge, so let's set the scale on 0.001, or is it too tiny? 0.005. Yeah, this is fine, because we don't need them to be that much visible. Finally, set the scale randomness again on 0.8. Let's make a backdrop. By the way, select the bubble and move it aside a little bit more. Shift A in the mesh, add a plane, then press R, X 90. Press G, Y, move it back, then press S to scale it up on a considerable amount. Now for the lighting, Shift A in the light, add a point light. Press G, Y and move it closer to the backdrop. I think the backdrop is too far. So something like that looks nice. And now that we have a light, we can enable scene light and scene board. Then with the light selected, go to the light panel, and we have the power here which is too low for the time being. So let's increase it to 2500. And this looks really nice. And by the way, I think the particle system of the Alembic file is too big. So let's decrease the scale 0.005. Looks better, still looks big. But let's go with that, we can always change it. And here is the point. Let me bring the bubble over here. I said we should invert the normal of the bubble. So take a good look at the particle system. If with the bubble selected, if we go into edit mode, press Alt N to set the normals back to their normal position. See what happened to the bubbles. They are not stretched anymore, and they don't actually like the bubbles inside a droplet. If we press Alt N again and flip the normals, you see we have a much better bubble for now. That is why I mentioned we should flip the normals. So we have a good lighting for the time being, but we can improve that if we add another backdrop over here. So select the backdrop, press Shift D, then Y and move it to the other side. And here is a good point. If we enable the face orientation, we need the normal sides of these two backdrops to be facing each other. So with this one selected, press RZ 180, something like that. Now we can disable the face orientation. Fine, now let's press Shift A to add a camera. And I want to have a view like this, but as you can see, this backdrop is intercepting my view. So to fix that, select it and head over to the object panel. Open viewport display. Here we can set the display as to wire. It is working but not completely, because we also should, under visibility, the visibility ray, should disable the camera. And what happened is something like this. We can't see this backdrop anymore, but its effect is still inside the scene, and this is exactly what we need. So for the first shot, I want to have a view like this. So I can press Ctrl Alt and numpad 0 to frame the camera nicely in place. And then to have more control over the camera, we can press N to open the side menu. In the View tab, we have an option called Camera to View. If we enable that, we can control the camera using the mouse scroll. And this is pretty handy. So something like this looks really nice. Now we can disable that, scroll forward to have a bigger view. And by the way, we can select the camera, and in the camera panel, under viewport display, we can increase the passport out to 1 so that we can have more focus. And finally, select the point light. In the light panel, we can change the color, by the way, and this will drastically affect the atmosphere of your scene. So I guess for our case, a blue tint color will work the best, but it is still your own choice. And finally, to improve the look of our scene, we can go to the render panel, scroll all the way down under color management. Here we have the view transform, so we can switch it to a standard or filmic, but anyway, I guess AGX is the best for our case. But I wanted to mention this look option, which is actually the contrast. So this set on none, which means there is no contrast, but if you set it on high contrast, you see this is much better, I guess. Unfortunately, I haven't used this in my own final render, so you can definitely use it. Let's play it, take a look. Oh, it looks great. And by the way, open a new window here and make sure it is set on 3D viewport. You can select the Alembic file and make keyframes for that. For example, up to this point, we say we want it to be in the same position. Then we can press K to make a keyframe for location and rotation. Then let's move forward a bit to somewhere around here maybe. We can move it down and then press R to rotate it, like this. Let me move it up a little bit. Then press K to make another keyframe for location and rotation. Now if we play, you can see how it works. Let me move this keyframe a little forward to have a slower animation. You see, this is looking much better now. And with that done, we can go ahead to make the second shot. So let's press Ctrl S to save our project. Then I highly recommend to take a copy of your blend file and rename it to Shot 2. So that if you make any changes to shot number 2, shot number 1 will remain intact. Now open the blend file of the shot number 2. Let's begin. Select the skin, press X to delete. Also delete the Alembic file. Now unhide the main Floyd ball, select it, and although we didn't bake the simulation, just to be sure, go to the physics panel and under catch, delete all bakes. Now with the Floyd ball selected, press tab to go into edit mode, and to have a better look, enable the wireframe mode. Then press numpad 1 to go into front view. What we are going to do is something like this. We should clear the center of the scene. By the way, make sure you are at the first frame, since we still have a physics simulation going on. As I have mentioned, hover your mouse over a ball, press L to select the entire mesh. And if you press numpad 0 to go into camera view, it will be much better because we are going to use the same camera for the shot number 2. Then press G and move it aside like this. Now we can press Alt A to deselect everything. Hover your mouse over another ball, press L to select the entire mesh. And do the same process until you have the center cleared. And for the shot number 2, I highly recommend to make these balls a little smaller. Later you will get the idea. And if you like, you can still make more duplicates. So press Shift D to make some duplicates and give their scale some variations. Then press numpad 7 to go into top view. Now we should align all of them on a straight line, which is this x-axis. So press L to select entire mesh, then press G, and if you like, you can press Y and align them on this red line, which is the x-axis. So something like this will look nice. Jump back into object mode, press Shift A in the mesh, add a cube. And here is a very important point. Make sure none of these balls have intersections with each other. As you can see, in my case, they have some intersections, and they shouldn't also have any intersections with this cube. So let me fix that. Now this is fine. Then with the cube selected, press Tab to go into edit mode. Make sure the face selection tool is selected and select these two faces at the back and at the front. Then press X to delete these faces. Now choose the face selection tool, hold down the Alt key and click on this edge to make a loop select. Then hold down the Shift and the Alt key together, click on this edge to also make an edge loop over here. Then press E to extrude them and right click to drop them in the same place. Let me zoom back, press S, then press Shift Y to scale them up on all the axes except for the Y axis. Scale them up until it covers all the Floyd balls. And if needed, you can press S, then Z to scale them down on the Z axis. So this is fine. Go back into object mode, and here there is another point. Go to top view and make sure, and this is why I mentioned that we should scale down the balls. They shouldn't have any interactions at the beginning of the simulation, like this. So we can select them, for example this one, until they fit nicely inside these walls. And this is pretty necessary. Now that we have our cube extruded, we can also make some duplicates. So this is fine for now. So go back into object mode, select the cube. The next step is to make shape keys for this cube. Of course, this extruded cube. So go to the object data panel, and here you can see the shape keys section. Click on the plus icon to make a shape key, which is named as basis, and as the name says, this one is going to be the main shape of the cube, as it is for the time being. So make another shape key, and with the second shape key selected, press Tab to go into edit mode. Press A to select the entire mesh, then press S, Y, and slightly scale it down on the Y axis. This will make sure when the simulation starts, these walls won't let the balls to go around and spread inside the scene. The balls will actually get stuck within these walls when they squish down, and they will fit them just nicely. Don't worry, you can always get back and tweak the shape keys. So I guess this is enough, or let me scale it down a little bit more. Something like this. Now if you go into object mode, and from here, using this value property, we can switch between the shape keys. And we can also animate them, and this is exactly what we are going to do. But before that, press Shift A, and in the force field, add the same force. For the strength of it, this time, let's go for -500. Let's play to take a look. This is going to be insane. Yeah, they work just fine. So let's go to the first frame, select the cube, and let's animate the shape keys. So with the CTI at the first frame, make a keyframe for the value property, and it should be set on 0. Then move a few frames forward, like frame 20 for example. Then set the value all the way on 1 and make another keyframe. Now to actually make this cube enter the game, head over to the physics panel and give it the collision. The only adjustment, just disable the single-sided. Now if we play, see what we have. So I guess I should scale down the cube a little more. So select the second shape key, go into edit mode, press S, Y, and scale it down on the Y axis a little bit more. Isn't that too much? Let's go with it. Now let's take a look. Yeah, this is looking much better. I really like that. Just wait and see until we do everything and take a look at them in the rendered view. And not to mention that if you make more balls, it will look much better. Much better. Now, like the previous shot, we should export the Floyd ball as an Alembic file. So make sure you are happy with the result, then select the Floyd ball in the physics panel under Catch, Bake All Dynamics, which will bake the simulation, and it will make the exporting process much easier and safer. Now go to rendered view. As you can see, this cube is intercepting our view. So what we did in the object panel for this wall in the previous shot, we should also do this cube. But since we have baked the simulation, we actually don't need it anymore and we can delete it. But just to be sure, we can hide it both in the render and in the viewport. Now let's export. Select the Floyd ball, go to File, Export, and choose Alembic file. Make sure to adjust the setting like before. So enable selection only, come down a little bit, enable apply subdivisions, and then finally in the particle system, disable export hair and export particles. Pick a location, introduce a name, and export. After the exporting is done, again hide the main Floyd ball, then go to File, Import, and Alembic. Navigate to where you have exported, and then choose the Alembic number 2, import it into your scene. To stay organized, rename it to Alembic. Go to the material panel, give it the same glass material. So here is a very good point. You see, there is some issue here. That is exactly because if I unhide the cube, you can see there is an intersection over here. So this is why I highly recommend to make sure there isn't any intersection, because it will result into something like this. So let me export again and I will come back here. Now if I press play, this is just working nicely in place. So let's go into rendered view and give it the same glass material. Looking great. Then let's give it a particle system, which is going to be again the bubbles. Give it a particle system, rename it to bubble, switch it to hair. Since in this shot we have more bubbles for the number, let's go for 2500. Emit from volume, jittering amount on 2, set the render as to object. For the instance object, choose the bubbles. Decrease the scale 0.005. Yeah, this is looking fine. And the same issue, if you don't have an even distribution of particles, especially in the center, that's because of this force field in the middle. And since we don't need it anymore, we can select it, press X to delete. Now you can see we have an even distribution of particles. So this was the shot number 2. Press Ctrl S to save your project. And for the third shot, take a copy of the shot number 2, rename it to shot number 3. And then open the blend file of the shot number 3. So for the shot number 3, delete the Alembic file, delete the cube, and also delete the main Floyd bouncy ball. Not needed anymore. Then to make the water ripple effect, Shift A in the mesh, add a plane. Press S and scale it way up, like this. Press numpad 0 to go into front view, and if needed, press G, Z to move it down until it fits nicely in frame. And since we have scaled it up in the object mode, press Ctrl A to apply the scale. Then for the upcoming dynamic paint physics, we need this plane to have more geometry. So go into edit mode, press A to make sure everything is selected, right click to subdivide it. Don't touch anything, open the subdivide menu and set the number of cuts on 100, which will give us much more geometry to work with. Then jump back into object mode and switch into rendered view. And it is better to look through the camera. And I don't know why this is happening. We should move it down more here. In the material panel, give this plane the same glass material. Now it is looking much better. Then to have a more cinematic shot, select the point light, move it down to get it closer to the bottom plane. Now to make the droplet, Shift A in the mesh, add a UV sphere. Give it the glass material and right click to shade auto smooth. Obviously, go to the particles panel, make a new particle system, switch it to hair, and since we have only one ball, set the number on 50. Emit from volume, jittering amount 2, render as object. For the instance object, choose our bubbles. Let's set the scale on 0.008. Scale randomness, let's go for 1. And by the way, if you don't like the distribution of the particles for the time being, you can go up under number. There is another option called seed. If you change that, you can change the distribution of the particles. So I guess something like that looks nice, especially we have some particles around the edges, which makes this cool stretching effect. Now to animate the ball, make sure the CTI is at the first frame. Press G, Z, move it up, and you can move it even above the framing, for example here. So since I want you to see the entire effect, I set it here. Now press K to make a keyframe for location. Then move a few frames forward. Let's go to frame 40. G, Z, move it down. Or let me get out of the camera view. G, Z, move it down and make sure it passes the plane. You can always tweak that. Press K to make another location keyframe. And here is the point. If now we play the animation, our droplets keyframes are set on Bezier. It means that it has a slow movement at the beginning. In the middle, it gains some speed, and then at the end, it will be again slow. But we should have a constant speed all over the path. So in the timeline, press A to select all its keyframe, then press T to open the keyframe interpolation menu. And right now they are set on Bezier, so set them on linear. Now it has a constant speed all over the timeline, which is pretty fine. Let's get into physics. With the ball selected, go to the physics panel and this time give it the dynamic paint. And since this object is moving and it is the cause of the rippling effect, we should set its type on brush. Finally, add the brush, and the setting of it is just fine. Select the plane, give it the same dynamic paint, and as you have already guessed, you should set the type on canvas, which is as a default. Add the canvas. Since we want to have the water ripple effect, we should set the surface type on waves, which will be actually representing the water wave. And with the default setting of it, let's play the animation to take a look. You can see it is looking pretty good. But we forgot to do something. With the plane selected, right click to shade auto smooth. And here is the last point that is worth mentioning. We have subdivided these planes 100 times. So if your PC can handle that, press A to select everything in the edit mode. Right click to subdivide it once more. This will give a better result. You see, this is more natural now. And by the way, if you set the damping on 0, I guess it will give even a better result. You know, it is not the normal water anymore, but it looks cool. And we have a pretty good result. And this was it. So see you next time.